Okay, so today I'm with Zoot, a caster who comes from Quake Live. He's casted the 125 FPS Cup for many years. He's casted some legendary Quake Live tournaments, such as the QuakeCon 2016 Grand Final. And he's been pretty much everywhere ever since Quake Champions started. Whether it be the Dreamhacks, the QuakeCon, the PGL, like he's always there, always casting. So, how you doing, man?
Yeah, not too bad. Good day today. I'm excited to have been asked by you to be interviewed. So yeah, I'm hyped. How are you doing?
It's a pleasure. I'm doing great as well, man. It's just, as I said, it's a bit surreal, like doing this with you after having spent so much time watching your streams and you casting. So I'm really glad to be doing this.
Hey, don't worry. I'm the nervous one right now. I've got to hold myself up to a good standard. Anyway,
So
when you're ready.
Don't worry about it. All right. So for my first question, it's about your name. So where does it come from?
So that's a good question. I had a name change. I say a name change. It sounds so formal. So my alias changed when I was 18. I've been playing games for a long time. I've been playing Quake 3 as well. I was in the Quake 3 community. My name was, well, the name before I'd made the sudden change was Apache. And to make a long story short, I won't go into too many details. I kind of got exiled from this community for I wasn't toxic. I didn't cheat or anything, okay guys? It was just something that happened. I changed my name, and the first name I changed it to was I think it was Trim. And I had that name for a week or two, and I was just going into like these Quake 3 servers with that name, and then for some reason I don't know why Trim wasn't suitable. I actually kind of liked it. As Zoot happened to come up for one reason or another. I don't really remember why. I think what sticks out in my mind more is just going through that name change, because I was Apache previously for a number of years. And then eventually I just took hold of this one so I could go into the servers more anonymously. And I think very soon after that, I left it. It was in the Excessive Plus Quake 3 community. I left it and joined Quake Live.
All right. So now...
non-answer, but yeah, that's what you get.
Okay, it's alright. I think it's enough details to have a bit of mystery around your name. So now, as I said, you're very famous as a caster, but what I'd be interested in now is your history as a player. For example, did you compete in some games? Did you compete in Quake 3, Quake Live, or games outside of the Quake franchise?
Not enormously. Before I really knew what esports was, I was playing in like Nations Cups and team games in this Excessive Plus community, which I'm sure people will crucify me for. I mingled around some other modes, not really. I've always been passionate about playing and improving my skills, because I'm generally very competitive. I was competitive when I was young outside of games, but one of the reasons I transitioned a bit more from a player to a caster is I gave myself the shoddy excuse that my internet was too bad. I had too bad ping. Let's see if I can get people to broadcast for me, and I can try to commentate, and that's an entirely another story in itself. Which is a shame, because I got like 70 ping minimum to servers, and I just felt for some reason it was holding me back, even though I know there's plenty of like Russian players, Eastern European players who have dealt in other parts around the world, the Australian players as well, where they have to deal with high pings, and they get to a really good level. I kind of blocked myself from that. When I started casting, some feedback I got was, after a couple of years having done it, was it'd be great if, you know, we had casters in the community who were playing at that kind of high level, because people like Too Good already gone. There wasn't loads of casters lurking around. So I kind of made a bit more of an active decision to play more and not really compete, but get to a point where if I was competing, I wouldn't be doing abysmally. So that kind of drove me just to like grind the duels more, just grind the game. I'd previously been playing CTF at not a terrible level, but I think I really took hold of duel and enjoyed that mode a lot.
Okay. So now, what you're referring to, so yeah, casters like not being too bad at the game. Here's something I'm wondering, because it's a debate we often see. Like, do you think casters need to be good at the game to be efficient?
Not everybody. No, I think at the time of calling, back when this was some feedback, I think we just didn't have many casters, so whoever was doing it. It was as good as if they, it was nice that just people were casting when they had the moment to do it, like the Level Up TV guys, like myself. But as I said, like Joe and Too Good had been long gone at this point. You occasionally had Jahar doing some stuff over in North America, but even DJ Wheat, Fish Sticks, Grease Scotsman, people like this, which are the guys that I grew up with in Quake Live TV, listening to their commentary, they'd already passed off into their own different priorities. I think nowadays, though, in Quake Champions, it depends what role you want to fill. We're kind of gifted with this esports schedule. We've got tournaments going on, so when you're at an event, it's important that you don't need to be able to do everything, but what you need to be able to do is what your specialist subjects are. Are you going to be a high play-by-play caster? Are you going to be a color commentator and focus more on the analysis segment? In which case, you do need to play the game a lot more and have a good understanding of the intricacies of the meta or the strategies within whatever game mode that you're looking at. Or you just have the pure analysis, no commentary, or maybe you're a host or something like that, where it's really you just need to know the scene, you need to know the players and the community. So it's I don't think the calling is quite the same now, but I think if you ever want to build your level, it doesn't help to keep playing and keep improving your game.
All right. So in all those different roles of casting that you've described, where do you see yourself fitting?
It's a good question, because I really love doing play-by-play, actually. It's nice to shout. I don't know if it's some kind of vanity thing as well, because you can get like the the sound clips, the audio clips where you're doing the hype moments in a tournament and whatever, and that's always fun. But I feel like I've got a really good understanding of the game as well, and I think I can do color commentary, but I've never really approached that role seriously enough to been doing that. So when I'm casting with a lot of people, we tend to be quite dynamic with one another. So if I'm casting with, say, Jason or Ketchup, we'll kind of move between who's doing the play-by-play, who's doing the color, and so on. And of course, actually, DDK is a really good example. I was casting with him for a while, some time ago. We would switch between the two of them, so it was entirely dynamic. I think some people might remember us as the dynamic duo. Feels weird remembering and saying that. But no, I probably do behave more on a sort of play-by-play level, I guess. Okay. If it's like in a casting partnership, rather than just... If I'm on my own, then I'm doing a bit of everything.
So now with Quake Champions, the production value and everything, like the budget is much higher for everything that is regarding casting. Like we've seen tournaments with like 7 casters. That's what I remember seeing for Dreamhack Winter. And I'm not sure like there was that much, basically, like, yeah, production value regarding Quake Live casting. Like, how would you say it's evolved from Quake Live, which seemed to be like a bit more like, on the fan-made side of things, to like the big budget production value of Quake Champions?
Yes. Well, how do you mean? What's the differences been?
Yeah, but like asking? What basically have you seen an evolution basically from Quake Live to Quake Champions?
Well, oh God, I remember, what was it, Dreamhack Winter or something, 2011, something like that. It was just before the year before I was getting into events myself, and I think it was the year that I started casting. They did a stream of the tournament. I think it was entirely player run. I don't think there was much of a budget. I believe Trance, who was working with Twitch for a long time, maybe he's still working with Twitch, actually. Should know that. He came over to Sweden, and it's actually part of the reasons I think he actually got into Twitch, because he just set up the stream. He did everything. It was back when actually streaming was still fairly new. God, I don't, excuse my history, but maybe that was around the transition from Justin to Twitch, or just shortly after. And all the players, they were setting up everything. They organized who was going to go on the stream, who was going to do the commentary, who was going to do interviews. They just talked to each other, and it was a hugely like special moment. Something that you see. I think the closest we've got to that in our modern Quake Champions streams is possibly Dreamhack Tour, where we did have a lot more players coming on board, who were talking to the commentators, getting involved in the commentary. And I guess even day one QuakeCon wasn't so different. We had a lot of community influence also there. But I mean, budgets have changed since the earlier days in Quake Live. We've got, as you've already said, there's a lot more talent that gets involved at these events now. We're getting like replays, we're getting a casting desk and just a hosting desk as well. I mean, you can even consider 2017 like at the Quake World Championship like this. Insane things going on that we never would have imagined in Quake Live. But it's obviously a positive evolution for Quake esports, and it's going to help us continue to push into the mainstream. We're doing pretty well on viewership now, better than we ever did in Quake Live. So I'm hoping like all the work that's going to be going into this is going to continue pushing and somehow like penetrate that market as the game grows, as the game keeps moving forward. But yeah, it's worlds apart. I was, for a lot of the broadcasting Quake Live, I was setting up the streams myself. There wasn't a production team. I got there, I was given a computer, and I was like, right, set up OBS or XSplit or whatever, set up all the stream overlays, set up everything you can. Oh yeah, do the casting. Also, make sure you know who's going to co-cast. Make sure that you've got the games ready too. There was no one to sort of, now people do all these jobs individually. So it's, I remember like the TDM Prague LAN, I was working with Bruno Ince and Koziel, guy who still does art for me. These fantastic beings, and we would do 16-hour days for 3 days in a row, making sure that the stream's going properly. I feel like I've lost months off my lifetime overall, but it's a growing process. So with all that rambling aside, my answer is yes, this is positive.
Okay. It's amazing. So now comparing Quake Live to Quake Champions, esports, say as the game itself, like for example, changes such as the fact that a Quake Live duel is with time limit, whereas it's round based in Quake Champions. The overall the fact that they've added champions to the games, and basically like all the changes that we've seen in Quake Champions. How would you say they impact you as a caster? Like, would you cast things differently based on all those elements?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. There is a certain sort of Quake formula to casting, which I couldn't really explain. It's kind of, I think, the feel that each caster gets for the respective game they're working in. And you kind of understand in Duel particularly that there's these periods of control, and that's the action can be sometimes more intense in either games for different reasons. You've got the champion ability, so the sudden aggression can be different, but just following it through commentary, I don't know if it's hugely different, to be honest. I feel like 2v2 was, and especially Sacrifice, was a bit more to get used to, because it was a very strange objective mode where literally 8 players on the server are all going to pile in on a single objective. So that mode I found really, really different to work with. 2v2, just because I hadn't done a lot of 2v2 casting in my lifetime anyway. But even though there is round-based duel and there are champions, you're still having this battle of control. Control is a bit different because it's 30-second respawners rather than 25 and 35 respectively. But the pace hasn't changed enormously. The only thing is that a map can go on longer in Quake Champions, but the blowouts feel a lot shorter. And that was one thing that I struggled with a lot sometimes in Quake Live, was you didn't frequently get games that were incredibly tense at all. The tense ones were super tense, but there was such a large amount of like games which you could tell were over in the first 2 minutes or less sometimes. And in Quake Champions, you can always have that comeback happening, learning the starting spawns, learning the start strategy. And do you want to insert, this is the second round, you won the first, do you want to go in for a cheese strat and try something unusual to get catch your opponent off guard? Whereas if you make a mistake at the start of a Quake Live duel, it's like, well, you've got to work with that mistake for the entire duration of the game. And that one mistake at the beginning could have cost you the game anyway if you're playing against a player who's good enough and going to punish you enough and just going to hold control. So I think I'm just talking about Quake now rather than casting it.
All right. But, so that's what the show is for, so don't worry about it.
But I think I think I enjoy casting Quake Champions duel a lot more though, for those reasons, because it's fun to examine the champion picks. That's something we obviously never got to do. You like in the time between games, you'd have to find something else to talk about, and part of the requirements of being a caster is also being able to talk about stuff in downtime. I don't even remember what I used to talk about in downtime, but now there's so much to, because the maps. Okay, I guess maps would be relevant in Quake Live, but then you've got to add in the champions. What's going to be picked on these? The meta. What are people going to be doing with all of that? And it just feels like there's more to talk about in Quake Champions, especially because our scene is so much more vibrant than it was in Quake Live.
So regarding the scene being more vibrant, that is something I've definitely seen, because in Quake Live it felt like you had, I don't know, like say 3 top players. Like during the end you had Evil, Cypher, Rafa dominating, like then a bunch of other really good players, like you had Cooler, like Kilson, but like the results were much more consistent, and basically like you could rise in Quake Champions. It seems to be a lot more surprised, I would say, in the tournaments. Like for example, we had a huge surprise recently that was Racy beating Rafa. That like we knew Racy is a great player, but I don't think a lot of people saw like imagine him beating Rafa just after Rafa had taken PGL. So how do you feel like how do you see and how do you explain this element of Quake Champions?
Well, I think a lot of people are conditioned through having, we've got a lot of loyal Quake fans who've been conditioned through the years, and I'm part of that as well, to seeing, as you say, people like Cypher or Rafa mostly, especially when it came to QuakeCons. Evil's been there, the players you mentioned. I'll definitely add the Hang to the list too, who was competing for titles. But if it wasn't Cypher or Rafa winning, it was like, this is just unusual. Sure, what's it? Evil won a big DreamHack tournament in this sort of mid period of Quake Live. That was kind of cool, seeing someone that wasn't Cypher or Rafa dominating at that stage in Quake Live. But otherwise, it's like, okay, these are the top guys, and they're always going to win. And if someone else wins, it's lucky. Especially moving into Quake Champions, like no one's going to beat the old pros. Well, firstly, it's a different game. There's a lot of the core Quake mechanics to get involved with, the understanding of how to manipulate, use control. But because there's money, a lot more money on the line, there's a lot more people who've been interested. There's been people who've been on the sidelines in Quake Live, but have never pushed themselves that extra distance, because the time to benefit ratio is just not really that favorable at that point. I think maybe 2 players who pushed themselves a lot in the last 5 years of Quake Live that I can remember the most, probably Backstein and Zorak War, and they both had brilliant results at LAN, respectively, but there was never enough of them to really push it to that next level. And now when we've got into Quake Champions, people like Razy, who never competed in Quake Live but was playing really actively. You had Claws there who played online cups. Venger was there as well. There's Sirius was there, but he wasn't much of a dueler. These people, now there's competition, now there's a scene, and then the streaming is popular and the communities really got engaged. It's no surprise that we're seeing younger talent coming in, challenging the old guard. And it doesn't surprise me at all that we're getting something like this. It would have surprised me a lot if people like Cooler and Cypher and Rafa were just only dominating and not being challenged by anybody else. That's why I actually find it really impressive how well Rafa has been able to do for like almost all the time he's been in Quake, because that's an exemplary performance. But it's nice that the amount of competition we have now is inspiring younger players to want to do something and to want to mix something up. So basically, if anyone's like, oh my god, new players are doing well, it's got to be the game, it's got to be something else. It's literally, this is what happens when people are super motivated for competition, and there's a lot of people fighting for a title rather than 3 or 4 people who have put in much time throughout a year, and then a lot of other people coming up last month till QuakeCon. Let's all practice a little bit. This is what it is to have proper competition.
Absolutely. So going back on the game modes, we're talking a bit about 2v2 and Sacrifice. And, well, as you know, like Sacrifice wasn't much of a success as an esport game. And the main reason for that was that it was very hard to spectate. And so now, with CTF, well, basically being right around the corner, and CTF being actually like quite similar to Sacrifice, like what do you say would help CTF succeed where Sacrifice has failed?
I think just conceptually the CTF is going to be better, even with exactly the same spectator features as we have now. CTF is going to be better because it's not 8 players going for a single objective. There's 2 objectives on the map instead. You've got people either defending, attacking, or supporting either of the objectives. So already you can identify, say, a couple of key players on the map who you'll want to spectate, who are going to be going after the objective. That could be 1 attacker from both sides, or maybe even there'll be 2 attackers from both sides. We don't actually have any idea what the strategy is going to be like yet. So you can already build a narrative around that. And that's what's really important. It was very, in casting and producing like a competitive stream of Quake, you have to be able to build a narrative. When you've got 8 people who are going after a single objective, and you're trying to paint a story of, okay, what is this individual player doing? What does this player mean to the team, other than the fact that his particular ability is supporting in one way where it's unique to his other teammates? That doesn't tell much of a story. It doesn't allow you to build a personality around that player within the game. It's a lot harder to give viewers a reason to cheer for that particular person. And I think already CTF, just at its most basic level, is going to be able to do that. However, to actually push over to the next level, and I really hope it's something we can look at urgently in 2019, is actually getting some modernized spectator features. I appreciate that there's a lot of gameplay related things that are integral to the game that have needed to be resolved, but I think it's really important that spectator features need to be looked at. And I mean, there's a number of different things you can do with this. I don't know if we'll have, the follow flag carrier, follow power up, if we're going to be able to view the accuracies. We're going to be able to have like a full team HUD on both sides. I mean, you can get inspiration from other games as to how it can help Quake Champions. And I'm sure if you gave me enough time, I think, and write down a list of things that'd be cool to see within it. But I think even from a basic standpoint, it's already going to be an improvement over Sacrifice.
All right. So now with Dreamhack Winter approaching, so we know it's going to be 2v2. And while some people say it might be the last major 2v2 tournament, well, we don't really know yet. But overall, we've had this huge ability nerf patch. I think it was just like, well, one or 2 weeks ago. So which team do you see succeeding the most at Dreamhack Winter? Like, well, what are your predictions for this tournament?
Liquid is by far and away the favorites for 2v2. And there's nothing that can take that away from them. The only thing that can maybe stop them is if they, for some reason, can't deal with the pressure of the expectation. But I already think everyone knows they don't really care. They'll deal with that. It's up to the other teams to be able to deal with the pressure of actually taking something away from Liquid. In terms of the European scene, it's really, really difficult to determine who's doing incredibly well. This patch has changed a lot of things up. There's not been a single team, at least at the top level. I don't say top level, I mean like top 16 level, who I think have actually stuck around all year long. I think Liquid, like Rafa and Dahang together, are the only team to go through Dreamhack Tour, QuakeCon, and Dreamhack Winter just as the same partnership. And that already helps so much to have that bond. And they've known each other for a long time anyway, so there's that enhancement as well. But other teams, especially the Europeans, have mixed themselves up a huge amount. I wonder if a team which doesn't have claws in it is going to be able to have a greater impact about it, only because claws seems to struggle versus Liquid. So I wonder if Tox Cooler can do something. They look all right, but and I know they'll do well on land, but I don't know if I see them as the best European team at the moment. Razy and Sidestep, they could do brilliant. It's really, really difficult to tell, if I'm honest. This is probably going to be the most exciting 2v2 tournament of the year. It's absolutely up in the air, and whoever comes second to Liquid, I just hope they're going to challenge them hard in the finals. So it's really, really difficult to tell right now.
So now with this ability nerf, go ahead.
Zron and Claws as well. I've obviously got to throw in the mix. Just as I named a few teams, they're obviously also contenders for that spot.
And I'd say Cooler and Toxic as well, of course.
Yeah. I mentioned Cooler Talks. They're definitely up there. It's just I think how the com's going to be on LAN. They both perform great on LAN, but God, you know, the recording of this interview is just like a couple of days after Liquid landed in Europe, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, Liquid, they lost maps to Cooler and Tox." Like, yeah, but they literally just go off the plane. They think they're 8 hours in the past or something like that. You guys have got to give them, cut them some slack right now. These practices mean nothing, and we'll see, see where it takes them. Especially when DeHang, I think his shape has been dragging a little bit because he's obviously working full time at the same time. When you give this guy a boot camp and he's focused on nothing else but Quake, you're going to see some unbelievable shape from him. So I don't think people should take those practice games that are on the stream too far out of context, because practice is practice, and it means nothing until you actually get to the LAN.
So now, with the ability nerf, how do you think that will affect the way players approach 2v2 and duel?
I'd already speculated on duel a bit a couple of days back, and as we've seen a couple of the cups, Quake Open League, saw Battlefire recently, that I think it's going to be, I think it's a lot slower. I expected it to be slower because the fights last longer now. It's easier to get away in certain scenarios. Cooldowns are longer for a lot of abilities. That everything got unified to 45 seconds. So I expect it to be a little bit more thought out. I think more champions are viable in this meta, and it definitely makes it really interesting when you put the bands across. And sure, you can have champions now like Anarchy, where by the rate of the units per second they're traveling around the map, it looks faster, but are they actually achieving their objectives faster? Are they getting frags faster, or are they still kind of like poking each other from across the map and seeing where things go from there? In 2v2, again, I don't know as much. I've been seeing people being very aggressive in their practices. But then again, you get certain teams, certain styles that like to kind of slow down and be a lot more control-based. Maybe capitalize less off the control they have, but that means they're taking fewer risks. And just make sure they, don't go for the 50 frags in 15 minutes. Just go for the win in 15 minutes. So for me, it feels like duel's been affected a bit more. We'll see exactly in what way very soon, I'm sure. People are hitting a lot of LG right now, that's for sure. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I'll just say
definitely.
That's my answer.
Yeah, and by the way, just a little information. This interview will be posted after Dreamhack Winter. So
it will be posted after?
Yeah.
All right, so
that's
fantastic to see how Rapid dominated everybody in that tournament. He was so damn good. Claws, 17th place in duel. Man, you've got to step it up next time. Great to see Wenger breaking top 4 as well in duel. I got nothing else, sorry.
It's good enough. That's very bold of you. I didn't expect such courage, so I'm impressed, man.
No.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see.
I'm going to smack talk so hard after this, but that's fine.
All right, so now, another change that I remember, there wasn't like that much hype about it, but in the ability patch, what they've done also is basically rework how the ammo system functions. So I remember it seeing it affect duel, so that now basically when you pick up the weapon again, it doesn't give you 10 extra ammo. Sure. It just refills back to the standard maximum, so like 10 for rockets, for example. And every time you pick it up again, it gives you just one rocket, or like 10 LG. That affected 2v2, right?
That's a good question. I played 2v2 1% of the amount I played duel, but I have no doubt it would have an effect on it. It had a huge effect on duel. I remember speaking with I think it was Ints about it, either on stream or on Discord or something, and it's actually a pretty goddamn impactful change. Some people like to camp a weapon so that they can get that double, like you have 10 rockets and I'll just wait a few more seconds and I've got 20 rockets and now I can sustain myself around the map for a lot longer with this weapon. And I'm sure that's going to have some kind of effect on the weapon control on a map. even if weapon spawn is 5 seconds, being able to deny rockets from your opponent. God, I don't know if players are going to start counting the amount of rockets that the opponents are using. It's obviously more important to see to have a feel for those ammo crates on the map, which I think people were kind of they would maybe remember where the LG ammo was, and they'd remember where the rail or the rockets were, but now people are remembering, okay, I got to remember where all of the ammo crates are, because everything is really, really important now. So I've got no doubt we're going to see some effect from it. I don't think we're going to suddenly see like some commentary go, oh my god, that is mind-blowing like difference from one patch to another. But I think the subtleties of the game are definitely going to have an effect on it.
Yeah, we might even see some player like timing the LG or the rocket crates. That would be quite impressive, actually.
It's on 30 seconds, isn't it? Well, the thing is, if so many things are on 30 seconds or 15 seconds, I'm sure they'll just add it as part of their route. They say, right, I've taken a light armor. I'm gonna go take the LG ammo crate. I was just thinking of like Corrupted Keep. You go from the nail gun room, you go over to get the lightning gun by Banana, by the hourglasses. Maybe you take the hourglasses as well, which is also on the same respawn time. You go get heavy, and you go, right, I know heavy's over there, so that means 5 seconds before I can start that whole route again, and you can consume everything. So yeah, I've got no doubt. People have been doing that in Duel anyway on Corrupted Keep, because the LG ammunition is quite scarce, and you don't want to put yourself out of position in the LG area above mega health. So I've got no doubt we'll see more and more players doing that.
Also, one thing I see with this change in 2v2 is I feel like it will, in a way, make the other weapons, like for example the shotgun, the heavy machine gun, and the nail gun, more useful in 2v2, because in this game mode, like you've got 2 enemies, so you're shooting more. So I remember, like even before this change, we saw much more often players running out of ammunition in 2v2 than in Duel. And I feel like since now you can't just rely on picking up the weapons to like refill as much, I think it might, yeah, like we might see the unholy trinity weapons, like, well, the non-holy trinity weapons being used more, I think.
Yeah. I think in 2v2 it's probably a lot more applicable than Duel, even though we see some very creative uses of all the weapons in Duel. In 2v2, if your partner's calling for you to come and support him, you go and support him. It doesn't matter what weapons you do or don't have, you go over there. Even if you haven't even picked up a weapon, you've just got starting machine gun, shotgun, nail gun, you just get yourself over to your teammate and you help him out, and you try to recover a 2v1 or 1v1 or 2v2 situation. So I think people throughout Quake Champions have been gradually getting better and better and better at using those weapons. I remember you talking to Venger quite a bit with the about the nail gun, and that is a really powerful weapon on land. The projectiles are incredibly powerful on land, so I've no doubt we'll see plenty of use of that at Dreamhack Winter. And shotgun, we know super shotgun is doing 140 damage. I remember the online cups leading up to Dreamhack Winter. I've been seeing brilliant use from that weapon too. So I mean, yeah, it's just as important to be skilled with every single weapon rather than just the rockets, the rail, and the lightning gun, because people aren't going to deny the shotgun, the tri-bolt. Well, okay, maybe the tri-bolt. They're not going to deny the shotgun, the nail gun, and the machine gun from you. They're going to be focusing on denying the holy trinity from you. So if you can get the job done with the others, I mean, all the power to you just then, because you can fight your way into people who are holding those stronger positions that might be covering near the power-up, the heavy armor, the mega health, or something along those lines.
So now, while we're on this topic of weapons, and all, another, like we had 2 changes regarding the weapons. Well, like 2 major changes, with the LG now being 6 damage and having its rate of fire increase, and I think that they also done some changes to its knockback, so that now the knockback is more important when the enemy is in the air and you LG him than when he's on the ground. And also the rockets who are now 1,000 units per second. How do you think that will affect also well, Duel and 2v2?
Having the rockets slow down a little bit is a very minor buff to some light champions, because it makes it a little harder to catch them off guard with the rockets. Weapon's still very powerful and it still feels very good to use, I think, but it's almost like a tiny touch up on the weaponry that certainly makes the people who are really interested in the light champions go, maybe I can focus on that specialist champion again and I can get some use out of him. I think we've already been seeing that again leading up to Dreamhack Winter. The knockback on the lightning gun, I think there were periods during the PTS leading up to the November patch where the nerf to the LG, it went to like 10 damage per tick, 120 DPS. That was a big buff to the light champions because the knockback wasn't really very significant at all. Even though the individual damage is quite good, it makes it harder to catch off guard a light champion during that period. But with the rate and fire increased and the knockback gone up, again, it's kind of battling these tiny subtle changes that can, it doesn't mean a huge difference when it's just on the casual aspect of the game where people are just playing and they're not really bothered what's going on. They just want to like blow something up, and they just want to immerse themselves in the arena. And even through the mid-level and high level, I'd say these are very, very subtle changes. But when you're at the pro level, these tiny changes can all of a sudden mean a huge amount, because that's going to affect exactly how people are going to play. And Lightning Gun right now is definitely an important weapon, as it has always been, but almost more important to be able to utilize it effectively, because that knockback on the ground can be very effective. We're seeing people hitting very high accuracies right now, and obviously, through the air, it's going to be punishing people who want to go up bounce pads or drop on you or whatever happens to be. So it's a fun change. I do kind of like what they've done with it, but I think we'll see over the long term, because just a couple of weeks for these types of changes, it's very hard to really determine how positive the long term is going to be. So I think we'll find out, and it'll be fun to see at Dreamhack Winter. I mean, it was really fun to see at Dreamhack Winter through all those LG lifts. Man, do you remember that LG lift at Blood Run? Damn. Sorry, I got nothing else.
So amazing. So what was my question? Yes, regarding adapting, which is something that I find really interesting, because I wasn't really around back then in Quake Live, but from what I've seen in basically like pretty much all Quake up until Quake Champions, there was no meta. Basically, like, there was weapons that were used in certain ways, like you had different approach to maps and all those elements, but there wasn't like this champions basically power ranking, because there was no champions. And so I feel like Quake Champions, also now that it's still in the early access, goes through a lot more changes than previous Quake did. And so I feel like it tests another elements of the players, which is their capacity to adapt to all those changes. And so that's something I find really interesting, and that will be definitely present at Dreamhack Winter now that abilities are much less impactful. So is this something that you've seen also as a caster on players, going from Quake Live to Quake Champions, this capacity to adapt to the meta and the way the game evolves?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the obvious meta and the more subtle meta. At the same time, the obvious stuff can be with the champions and what people are picking, and something more subtle. I'm not saying like no one can see it. Like, a lot of people will see it anyway, especially like within the European scene in Quake Live. There were periods where you had Evil at the kind of beginning of his journey, where he was this aggressive tyrant who would shut you down if you made a split-second incorrect decision of the weapon you had out. He would bite on you, he would go down with the LG, and he would absolutely destroy you. And he had this incredibly aggressive style where there was no stop button at all. And so he would either win 20-0 or he would lose 20-0. And then you kind of see, when the regions clashed, America and Europe, you'd kind of see a more optimized style eventually being had, which climaxed in 2016 final, I think, where it was Evil and Rafa playing some of the most optimal Quake Live duel I think we've ever seen. I thought it was just an insane display of skill between those players. But in Quake Champions, firstly, starting Quake Champions compared to playing Quake Live as a pro player, there's so much adaptation you've got to make. Some players have done it faster than others. You've got to get used to those variables with the abilities, which just the possibility of someone having their ability up is going to change the way that you're going to play against them, especially when abilities were more powerful than they are now in the November patch. It could determine what 3 champions has your opponent got. Okay, how am I going to play versus these 3 champions? Okay, I've killed one of the champions. He could play either one of 2 other champions. I've got to be ready for both of those champion styles so that I can defend against it off the spawn or anticipate what this guy's going to try and do off the spawn. And where in Quake Live, it was a bit like you weren't as afraid of somebody off the spawn. You could spawn frag more easily, and it was rewarded. Whereas spawn fragging can be harder in Quake Champions, depending on the champion that you're going against. And sometimes you really don't want to go for those spawn frags, even if you got a relatively clean kill. Because you can just immediately put yourself out of position on some items, or you can get punished super hard, just from the ability and from some of those starting weapons, which are still quite powerful. So throughout the game, people who are able to adapt fast to that meta, patch by patch, or people who are even setting the foundations for that meta, right, I'm going to do a super aggressive style, or like base or cool live, they're going to play super slowly, and they don't tend to change from that, but each patch they're going to continue trying to experiment with that type of play. People who are able to set that benchmark for what is optimal off that patch, and what are people not ready to play against, they're going to be able to have all kinds of advantages, at least until people start trying to copy that style, and then someone figures out, okay, what's the counter to that style? That's how it's going to keep pushing. And it can happen quite quickly when you've got a really competitive scene, because through a tournament, one style will be good at the beginning of the tournament. By the end, you're 2 styles difference away, and it's those players who have made those changes through the tournament that are going to be, getting the big monies.
Mm-hmm. So now regarding this capacity to adapt, which player would you say is like the number one player at changing his playstyle, his champion picks, and then all those elements based on the changes of the games?
Razy is the immediate name that comes to mind. He's gone through a very colorful period in Quake Champions where people have judged him one way or another, but people say every patch, oh, Razy's not going to be as good anymore because such and such changed. And it's not true. He's always there, and a lot of the time he's building those foundations of the meta. And you had periods where he had like the hang with his clutch at Dreamhack Winter, which is the one that stands out the most. But Razy's set a lot of the metas going into multiple patches throughout the last year and a half of Quake Champions. And he always comes back. People write him off and say, well, Razy can't come back anymore because X and Y is different. And then like a couple of weeks later, Razy wins the next online cup, or there's a really good placing at a land. And it's like, he's just someone who's very good at immediately understanding the games, not trying to force the game to, or not trying to force himself to play the game as it was, but constantly as it is. So I know that this is going to go out after Dreamhack Winter. I see going into Dreamhack Winter, Razy doing pretty well overall, but again, it's an extreme patch change, so who the hell knows the outcome? Again, it's hard to break it down, despite him having really great successes throughout all the Quake Champions.
So now, on the other hand, do you feel like there's maybe a player who struggles and who doesn't succeed as much as at adapting to the way the game evolves, the way the game changes?
Well, a lot of the people who struggle the most aren't even relevant anymore. They're people who came over and haven't done much. People like Strengths, and it's like they still, no matter whenever they try to pick up the game, they're still trying to play it like Quake Live, and it's like, no, sorry, you're not even entering near the realm of pro players within Quake Champions with that mindset. I think someone who's played at the top but still struggles a little bit, I think, feels like Cypher. He's a very interesting player though, and I think he's very creative in how he tries to do things. But I still think he's trying to like reinvent the wheel with how Quake Champions gets played, but without actually having tried out that fully adapted play style yet. I see strange ability uses from him. He's very much about mobility around the map rather than having this utility midway through fights. His ranger use just comes up to mind there. But I think a patch like this could see him get. I won't be surprised if he gets top 2 placing actually at this Dreamhack Winter. I think the ability nerfs could have a very positive impact on his results. But again, it's down to him. Again, is he going to has he just now adapted to the old patch and now it's got to adapt to the new one? I don't know. Again, we have very limited exposure to the players in a competitive environment leading up to Dreamhack Winter. So I think those 2 players. Let's think of another. No, not so much. I think, yeah, that's where I'd stand with that.
All right. So going back to Cypher, and what you said about him trying to reinvent the wheel, That is in a way something that we've seen in Quake Live. I remember Rafa talking about it and saying that he was talking about it with Foreign, that Cypher was one of those players that really forced Rafa to adapt his playstyle and just find new ways to approach the game, new way to counter Cypher's amazing mechanical skills and just great vision of the game. So in Quake Champions, how would you say Cypher is trying to reinvent the wheel?
I think, well, to me, all my judgment of that started when he was using Galena 6 months before, or more, before Galena was really a champion that became important in the meta. Which is it's interesting to see and it's fun to see, but I don't think it struck him immediate success. A lot of the times with Ranger, especially during the shub days where you could get that insta kill, he for some reason would never use or save that ability for a fight, especially if say versus a clutch or something like that. He would always be darting around the map, trying to put himself in position to maybe deal a bit of damage from you or cut you off from an item and maintain the item control. Whereas actually having that ability available to you in combat or as like a get out of jail free card or as a threat, just having it up but not using it is a threat to your opponent. As soon as you've got that, 25-second cooldown ticking, that opponent is counting his head right. Even if he takes a bunch of hourglasses, I've got like 10-second window right now where I can just charge him and he's incredibly vulnerable to me because I've got my ability up and he could very much suffer if I even catch him remotely out of position. And it's plays like that which I feel have prevented him from getting a bit more success within the game, because in terms of actually playing against him, it's incredibly difficult because he reads you so well. You always expect him to leave combat. If you've got, right, I've done so much damage to him, he's going to run away now. He's on 10 HP, and then he still turns around when you don't expect it and deals 200 damage to you and you're dead. He's got this surprise factor, this X factor, which is unbelievable, but he hasn't quite put everything together yet in the game to get to that top level. As Zoot says, just after Cypher wins Dreamhack Winter. I don't know, but this is the feeling I've got since, the start of seeing him in Quake Champions to just pre-Dreamhack Winter.
Something I find a bit fascinating about Cypher is the fact that he had a very slow start. Like his result, I think he couldn't play at QuakeCon. His results at the Italian Open, like he showed a lot of potential, but he was beaten by Vu, who had like this very slow playstyle in the Blood Run. I think he didn't do well. Yeah, he was top 4 Dreamhack Winter 2017, so that was pretty good. That was like him starting to really, have good results and being efficient at Quake Champions. And like he had a period of dominance actually with the Quake Open League. He's won 3 seasons in a row. He's beaten so Kilson, Cooler, Razy, like all the top players in Europe. But on LAN he hasn't really been able to take that up. I mean. At PGA, I'm not sure, like maybe he made top 8, I think?
No, he made top 12.
Top 12, yeah, so he didn't go as far as we would expect.
I think it was. Yeah, he lost to Razy, I think, in his group, which just knocked him out of top 8.
And yeah, the Italian Open also weren't that impressive from
his performance.
Yeah.
I thought the 2018 Italian Open, he started playing a lot better towards the end of the tournament. Again, another point is that I don't think he's necessarily thinking of like the order of champions that he's playing in, whereas the game in Quake Champions is, you are already making a good or bad decision just based on the champion lineup that you have at the beginning of the game, and also which champion you're using first, second, and third. And again, he loses to Razy. Razy said himself he's not proud of having beaten Cypher this way on Blood Run, but he did it. He did what he had to do to win, and that's because Razy made smarter decisions as well on the champions that he was using, the order in which he was using them. And Cypher, I can't remember what champion he used, but it didn't allow him to chase versus the champion that Razy had, and Razy was enabled to commit to the strategy that he had to make. And you talk about the Quake Open League periods where he won 3 in a row. I thought that was good for Cypher, but he needed that. But remember also he didn't go to QuakeCon. People were focusing on a $175,000 2v2 tournament. People were practicing for that day in, day out. And I think as much as, Quake Open League is extremely close to my heart, I think he rightfully reaped the benefits, while the community's majority focus was in a different mode at that stage. And, you know, it kind of it sounds like I'm really burning down what Cypher did with that, but I think it's possibly a sad truth. It was a good period for him, but at no point really did I feel Cypher's back to dominance or anything like that. Only the Italian Esports Open in 2018 almost getting over his demons against Razy and making it through to top 4. To me, that was probably the most impressive performance I've seen from Cypher in Quake Champions. So that could have been something that he really needed, just to show that he's this close to, this close to like breaking back into where he's probably believed, and a lot of people believe that he rightfully belongs.
Absolutely. So you mentioned Razy and this rivalry, in a way, like an indirect rivalry that Razy and Cypher have, which I found really fascinating, because even early on, like back in, I would say, the early 2018, I feel like that's where we really started seeing this, with Razy constantly beating Cypher in online cups. Like one of the major ones was at the BEAT Invitational. Razy managing to beat Cypher, and that continued on a lot of Battlefight Cups and ESL tournaments. And that's what has continued at PGL. He beat Razy beat Cypher. That was also the case in the twice in the Italian Open as well.
Was that twice? Was it twice? I can't remember.
I'm not sure.
Maybe it was only one.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
But yeah, Razy constantly dominating Cypher, and I feel like it's beyond just Razy being excellent and Cypher not having reached his potential yet. I feel like there's something in there, but I can't really put words on it.
I think that's the interesting part of Duel in general, and not just specific to Quake Champions Duel, but Duel overall. I think it shows itself more now in Quake Champions, now that we've got a lot more players there. But you have these favorable and unfavorable matchups between the certain players. Like Claws, phenomenal player, unbelievable talent, and you could expect him to take down games from pretty much everybody. But you put him against someone like Rafa or even Kilson. Kilson has fantastic results versus Claws. Suddenly you've got these people which can be a kryptonite to another player who maybe you'd expect to be unrivaled otherwise. So absolutely, with Razy and Cypher, Razy may have just figured out the secret to playing against Cypher, and he's doing that. And it's again the subtleties within the game between those two players and the battle of the minds. I'm sure there's many other matchups that people can think of which are favorable for some rather than others. Like Zron, for a while, I think his LAN performances unfortunately haven't been amazing lately, but he was someone who always would beat Wenger in a duel, and only incredibly recently has Wenger been able to finally like overcome that threat. And I think he's also been able Zron has also had brilliant results versus Razy generally, when Razy overall you would rank him as a higher player in duel. So you get these very interesting stories, which I think go beyond just a very simple ladder system. This guy's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because number 1 can beat 2 to 9, but number 10 might have a really good chance against number 1. So it makes it exciting to see those results in duel and those kind of like rivalries. Like the players maybe won't say rivalries because they kind of don't want to like, force drama or anything. They'd be very diplomatic because you can obviously, players are still close in relationship wise at top level because they practice with each other as well, and they don't want to like say something that's going to make them fall out with the other player. But things like Razy versus Cypher, or even Razy versus Wenger, who have got like 20 matches against each other now, and very interesting how those results have gone. There are rivalries that we can create because just how one player's suffering in those rivalry compared to the other.
So, changing a bit the subject and going back to you as a caster, what I find really impressive is how long the days are. And like, for example, the one I was thinking of is Dreamhack Tour, because you were 3 casters, and yet it was an open tournament, so a lot of matches, and you had some, like I think the VODs were like what, 10, 12 hours per day, which is like super long. Like of course like there's some downtime, like between the match and everything, like you cycle between the 3 casters, but like generally speaking, how is it like to isn't it a bit difficult to cast for like just an entire day?
It's actually surprising. It can sometimes be harder when there's more downtime for a caster and there are more casters, because you're still focusing on the games, but you haven't got like the energy of actually being at the desk to, you know, to keep the adrenaline going or anything like that. Because no matter whether you're on screen or off screen, you're focusing on the results, you're focusing on the storylines, because you're still presenting a show at the end of the day, and you can't go into the next match you're casting not having known what just happened. But I'd say it's a lot more friendly now than it used to be. It used to be just fueled by determination, willpower, and just the excitement of actually being at an event. You wouldn't be getting paid. I don't know. I think I barely earned for most of the events I did for 4 or 5 years in a row. It was just so hype being there, and I would cast pretty much every game during a day, and it would last for 4 or 5 hours longer. But it was never a problem, because while you were doing it, it was just, you felt nothing. It was like the players are playing for just the same amount of time. That's an insane amount of time to be playing for. So I think maybe the hardest gig in Quake Champions so far, in terms of how tired I think I felt after the event, was probably Dreamhack Denver, just because a lot of the time we had like these stools instead of like chairs that we sit like I'm sat in now. And while you were in the analyst segment, you wouldn't be sitting down, you'd be standing up and doing the thing. And then when you get into the game, you can kind of sit back on a stool. But it was actually more comfortable to commentate standing up. And then you realize at the end of the day, and at the end of like the 3 days of the tournament, I've actually just been having 3 full days standing up, commentating. It's like, you know, having a job doing any kind of vaguely physical work. You just feel exhausted at the end of it, and I've never felt that tired casting any gig, even ones which, you know, even the old events, where I'm sure anyone who's worked an event like that will tell you how crazy it is to do. Then I was really exhausted by Denver, but it was a really fun event nonetheless. You know, had it put nothing against my experience, I thought it was really positive. But when you've got a lot of talent and you've got a lot of people to share with, there's obviously there's more to do, there's more people to talk to, more people to break down, more ideas that you can share among each other, more storylines that you can create when you're kind of just kind of creating ideas with one another, talking to players and finding out what the players say, because one caster or analyst or whoever might have talked to a player and found out something that you otherwise wouldn't have found out. So you can still, there's that small chance that you can kind of create even more exciting storylines, I think. So yeah.
So now on the online casting side of things, so as we know, you're a streamer, you're very often on Twitch streaming the Go for QC tournaments, though I think you do this like with the ESL, the Battlefy tournaments. So yeah, like you cast a lot. You're probably like the one casting, you're definitely like the one casting the most in Quake Champions, and not just at the LAN tournaments. So what I'm interested in is, does it get stale after a while, maybe just watching so many matches?
I found that in Quake Live I burnt out from it, I think, a lot more. Because there were rarely any like changes in the meta going on. And something that happens during casting sometimes, and you have no explanation. It's not even like sugar crashes. Sometimes you just get uncontrollably tired, and you just need a break for like 2 minutes as soon as possible. And I remember times in Quake Live where I've almost fallen asleep on casts, just because, not even necessarily because the game, I could be having a really exciting match, an amazing game could be going on between like Kilson and Avec or something like that, and it would be going into overtime, but something in my body is telling me to shut down. Now you want to sleep. I can't do anything, and I'm trying just desperately just to talk, but it's really just this kind of monotonous dribble that's coming out, just trying to make it seem like you're still present in the cast, when really you just need to, you know, curl up into a ball for 5 minutes. I haven't really felt that with Quake Champions, and I don't know. I don't know what the explanation is over there. I found that in general there are more players to be interested in Quake Champions. There are more storylines to focus on. There's more new players coming up. You're more likely to see a new player do something interesting. I think from a core level, just the amount, because I'm one of the lucky people who's fortuitous enough to I'm able to make a living off, you know, Quake, which is fantastic, and I'm massively grateful that I'm able to do that. But it's definitely tiring being exposed to it 24/7. But I do that to myself because I love just being unraveled in the community as much as possible, talking to people all the time. I love the gossip. I love engaging with people. But I'd say, you know, maybe there were some more unforgiving patches earlier on. Definitely in 2017, there were some just really crazy things going on with just the pace of the game. But as the game has been developing, changing, it's gotten better to cast. I probably, just from the casting just alone, I probably burn out less on those moments. And as long as the cups are going on and players are signing up for them, and as long as we're getting a variety of people getting involved, no, there's always something to be interested in, always something interesting to tell people watching.
All right. So for my next question, it's a bit of a difficult question, but I'd be interested in asking it to you so that we basically like get your side,
Okay.
see like how it is from your side. Like for one thing that we sometimes see, I think it's especially on Reddit, is you've got a bit of a reputation for like a couple of months or so of being like overly protective of the game and always defending it, and
Right.
like in a way acting as if the game is like doesn't have any problems, perfect. So like how would you explain this? What is your approach to basically like the way you showcase the game? And like, for example, do you sometimes like really see some problems with the games? Would you like decide to keep them on this side? Like, just to, yeah.
Well, firstly, the game is obviously not perfect, right? The game is in early access. The game is constantly changing. If you compare how the game is now to how it was in closed beta, million miles apart. But then you got to think about, you know, what's important. It's important that Quake keeps going, Quake keeps developing, people keep playing Quake, more people get interested in Quake. Then you got to think about, how are you going to be able to support this? What are you going to be able to do in order to help us get through this process as the game continues to get better and better? Obviously, feeding back in a sensible way, in an honest, constructive, critical manner is important. I'm not the type of person in real life who will flame, you know, anybody for something that thinks, I'm not going to go to a supermarket. Oh my god, this product's out of date. I'm going to scream the house down. I'm not going to do that. I'll calmly, concisely explain my problem and I hope to get a resolution out of it. But for me, it's really important that the esports scene continues to grow. It's important for me that the casual player base grows. And then I think about, okay, what are my actions on my casts going to lead to positive outcomes? Now, positive outcomes for the community are more people are watching Quake, so more people are engaging in player streams, in commentary streams, in just casual streams, whatever it happens to be. If I'm going to be smack talking rubbish about the game, saying, like, bringing out every possible flaw in the game, highlighting it and exposing it and shit talking it, is that going to make people feel better about watching Quake? Is that going to make people feel engaged in watching Quake? No, it's absolutely not. More people aren't going to want to watch you because you're making the game look as bad as humanly possible. This is going to push people away. And it really surprises me how many pro players are like turkeys voting for Christmas through the early parts of Quake Champions would just openly smack talk any kind of possible issues that have since been resolved. And obviously not every issue's been resolved, but I think that the approach to how to manage oneself on stream for a lot of players has definitely improved. So if I'm someone who's surviving from Quake and wants to continue to do so, then I would want to inject some positivity, make people feel excited and feel good and warm about watching Quake and being involved in the community. And if I'm going to relay feedback, then I'm going to do it through the right channels. You know, there's Bethesda forums that you can do it on. You can do it on Discord. You can send private messages to the community managers. They're frequently available, frequently answering questions. And, you know, they are the all-watching eyes. They do see everything. And there are times where people might feel like they need to scream because there's processes and development that need to be gone through before changes can be rolled out. That's the nature of a big studio, and an indie studio has fewer barriers to get past in order to deliver an update. Whereas there's got to be a lot of discussion internally if one change is going to happen, and people have got to remember at the pro level they think incredibly differently about the game from the people in the casual level. These are two different. I would hate to play the game with feedback just from the pros, but then again, because I'm so involved in the esports side, I'd hate to play the game if it was just from the casual. So you've got to be able to support both of these sides. So I do have a positive image. I do obviously have a good relationship with the guys in ed, and I'm going to continue supporting the game. But there are definitely things that I'd like to see better. People I think tend to think I'm totally oblivious of any issue that is with the game because I'm so overwhelmingly positive all the time, which isn't true. I absolutely recognize there are flaws, but I try to, get people to be... On my stream, I tell if you've got some criticism, then let's do it the right way. Let's not just flame. Let's not call anyone idiots or anything like that, because that's just moronic. It's still important that we welcome people to the community, and we've seen that that the devs make active responses to community demands. So let's keep going in this, this decent manner. Let's act as a normal, functional society where rather than these people who are just shit talking, flaming each other left, right, and center. So I don't know if that really explains.
It does, yeah.
My views, but hopefully that injects some kind of insight into my thoughts.
Absolutely. All right. So now, is there any games that you would be interested in casting, or that in the past you had been interested in? Because I've looked a bit like at your YouTube channel. I haven't found much outside of Quake, so I think I remember seeing like some, what was it, Warcraft a bit, or what was that exactly?
So I've casted some other things, but 99.9% of my commentary has probably been Quake. So I've casted Dota 2. I think I've very briefly done CS:GO. I've done other arena FPS games, so like Reflex. I mean, I did Quake 3 CPM. I've done Warsaw. I've done I've done Shootmania. I did Shootmania a little bit. And I think dotted around some other arena FPS games. But I've been mostly about Quake because I've enjoyed doing Quake. And I've had opportunities in the past to commentate other games, but I've realized actually it's much more fun to cast Quake. But no, I'm someone who's getting married next year. I'm someone who I've been very career focused since I left university 3 years ago. I can't remember how long it is now. And so I'm thinking about what's going to be good for me, because I enjoy esports. I get a big kick out of esports. I get the biggest kick out of Quake. But if I were to look at casting other things, then, I mean, sure, I'd look at it. It's always healthy, I think, to have a busy schedule. And, to make money off going to events and things like that, it's incredibly helpful. So I wouldn't turn down opportunities to commentate other games. But I think that Quake Champions is something that will continue growing, so I can continue having that stream content, so that there's going to be a good level of events moving forward, and yeah, things like that. Yeah. Or do you want to know specifically more games about, or?
Well, yeah, if you feel like giving me some game names, I'd be interested.
I don't know. I wouldn't really want to get into things that are hugely established already, like League or like Counter-Strike or Dota or things like that, because these gamers have got their infrastructure is pretty much well intact already, and if anything, it's oversaturated with people who are very good at what they do and very good at casting and are already building themselves to the level to be at the top tier. So if I were to look at something, it'd probably be something like Rainbow Six. I don't know, maybe Rocket League, maybe games where the esports scene is still very much in the growth phase. So I think that's the kind of target area I'd be in.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so now for my final question. What do you say makes a good caster? And which tips would you give to someone trying to become to get into casting?
That's a really good question. I think firstly you've got to be incredibly I think you do have to be dedicated. You have got to put the time in it. It's very rare that you have people who just start casting and who just have that unbelievable knack for it. And I think historically, very few people have been able to. Some people just have the gift of the gab and they can just do it. But you just got to be able to first put a lot of time into it. You got to immerse yourself in that community. You got to start and actually not be surprised that you're getting 1 to 5, 10 viewers at the beginning, and you're going to have to try your best during those streams where you've got 10 people watching. And that's exactly how I started in Quake Live. That you're going to have virtually no people watching you, but you're going to put everything into it, and you've got to take every stream as seriously as every other. That's firstly important. You've got to be able to take criticism, because I spent way too long in Quake Live feeling like I could please everybody, and that if someone was flaming me for doing a crap job, that I could answer them, I could justify my position to them, and everyone would be happy. And I realized way too late, and way too many stresses later, I realized, you know what, some people just, they're going to be their opinion of you, and you're not going to change anything. So you've got to grow a bit of a thick skin fairly quickly, and not feel like you can change everyone's mind, because there's a lot of people who just won't. And you'll see a lot of insane opinions sometimes, some justified, some totally not, and you just got to let them fly. That's just the way it is. I think definitely it's going to help to get a good grip of the game. You don't need to become a pro player, but you definitely need to know the game's in and outs. You need to be up to date with the esports side. If you're just starting, let's say, I've been part of creating the Quake Open League, getting commentators who are starting in the Challenger division, rising their way through. They have the advantages. They're not going to just learn about the top players when they're watching events or even casting events. They're going to learn about all the people down below who the guys casting at top don't actually know much about. So they learn all the people who are probably going to be part of that future anyway. That's like a huge advantage right there. And it always helps analyze what are other casters in the scene doing, how are they controlling their voice. I think a lot of people, when they start out casting, I was definitely one of them, talk really quietly. You wouldn't really project your voice at all. And the difference between you analyzing something and you being hype and play-by-play was actually, there was no difference. You're talking the same way anyway. You might feel like you're injecting more volume, but you're really not until you actually project your voice properly. So I'd say think about that maybe a little later on, once you're used to kind of being on stream a bit first. But I think in general, just you don't. I'm not the type of person who says you just have to put the time in, and then you'll be good. Like you could be good having not put in a lot of time, but it's better to just put in a lot of time. Show that you're dedicated. That's how eventually you're going to be getting over to events, is by showing that dedication, being a part of the community. I think someone who's done a phenomenal job is 40 Lions. He's integrated himself amazingly into the community. He on like a daily basis, he's either streaming, he's commentating something, he's running his own streams, he's constantly on social media, and he's there, and he's getting better and better and better. He's really, really evolving as a commentator. And I think it's that kind of behavior that's going to allow you to learn a lot by doing it. But at the same time, being active, it doesn't matter if you're someone who's, like yourself, you're doing interviews, you want to do lots, you want to talk to lots of different people, and every time you do it, it doesn't matter if you start out as a professional or not, you're going to keep getting better and better and better at it. It doesn't matter if you're someone who just does tutorials on YouTube or whatever that content might be. It's just a case of quantity eventually is going to increase that quality. So I can't stress it enough. Don't just start and go, oh crap, I've only got 5 people watching me. You do it 5 times and you give up on it. If you really want to do it, keep pushing yourself. You will reap the benefits.
So before we finish this interview, have you got any final words? Any person you'd like to thank or something?
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I was excited to see your email and do this interview. But no, thanks to everyone who enjoys what I do, tunes into Zed Live, is excited about anything I have to say. I appreciate it a lot. Quake Champions has changed so much for me in terms of how I've been able to I don't know, enable a life where I can actually depend on it. So I'm unbelievably grateful for the people who have helped me achieve this. But otherwise, just spread the love, spread the message of Quake, and let's keep building this. Let's keep building this game, keep building this community, because I'm super excited to see where we're going to be going in 2019 and beyond.